Elaine Kub is our corn and soybean market analyst this week. The U.S. Department of Agriculture expects 10 corn-growing states to achieve record yields in 2016. It also believes farmers in 5 states will notch record average soybean yields. For the nation as a whole, the agency's August crop report released last week projects best ever production and yield in both corn and soybeans. The USDA expects Nebraska will follow suit and be the 3rd largest corn producer and 5th largest soybean producer. However, increases in demand categories for both commodities arguably helped buoy price reactions to the latest round of numbers. We talked with Elaine Wednesday afternoon and began by asking for her thoughts about the USDA's projections.
Well, those were very big numbers. They came out and said we're going to have more than 15 billion bushels of corn and more than 4 billion bushels of soybeans. So those seem like very large numbers, and we would have expected to see the market just collapse from that kind of bearish numbers. Those were surprisingly large. And maybe it was just coincidence, but at the same time, the palm oil market, sort of an international market, really was bullish for the edible oils that soybeans really benefited from. And so soybeans ended up closing the day higher and leading corn higher, and that's continued to be the case here. Even through this week, we've continued to churn steadier higher.
Were the other demand numbers enough to help kind of stabilize prices that day?
That's absolutely part of it. So we see the really big production numbers, and we do see larger ending stocks projected because of those production numbers. But there were also some boosts when you have this much availability of the feed grains in particular. So this is a story for corn and for wheat, which has a lot of low quality or low protein wheat that's going to work its way into the feed market. They are expecting to see that increase by 40 million bushels or 80 million bushels in the feed sector, as well as ethanol is doing well, as well as exports perhaps someday working their way into Brazil. So there are reasons to think that the ending stocks aren't going to be so crushing as those production numbers imply.
So I think those production numbers, it's important to note they were taken late July, early August, and in about a week and a half or so, enumerators will go out again to those same plots and take a look again. So the question is, during the month of August, has weather been enough to lower the production estimate?
No, I don't think there's a weather problem that we need to worry about, but I mean, there's certainly an argument to be made that those numbers were too large and that the facts won't bear it out once we start seeing, really reliable harvest estimates, once you get out and count pods or get out there and count kernels. And certainly once you see the actual harvest reports, it's certainly possible that those numbers will only get trimmed from this point forward in future reports.
Is that what the trade is expecting?
I think so. I think that's another reason why we didn't see them suddenly collapse, that this is going to be as bearish as a report as we see for the 2016 crop.
One more note on the production numbers. There's been a lot of talk this week in many marketing circles about tip back in corn. People are noticing it a lot. Do you think that's enough to make a huge difference in September?
I think field by field, just seeing tip back is not enough to worry about yield. That may just be a symptom of having really aggressive planting populations. So countrywide, I don't necessarily think that a few isolated, or not even isolated, even extended reports of tip back, that's not enough to convince me that we're going to have a major crop problem. Probably, like I said, trim it down from the 15 billion bushel number, but not enough to get really bullish.
Tell me what the reasons would be to be bullish right now.
Well, like I mentioned, there's been a lot of interest coming into the soybean market. We're seeing net long positions from the commercial funds in soybeans, perhaps tied to the international idea of the edible oil market, but perhaps also tied to the idea that commodities can be a hedge against inflation. That's another big headline that you're seeing this week, is the thought that the Fed is getting hawkish about raising interest rates. Some say as early as September, but maybe more like December, maybe early 2017. But if inflation starts coming in, that means that material goods start to be worth more, and commodities are material goods. So hopefully we'll see some more investment from the investment side of the market coming in and juicing up these prices.
What's the advice to the farmer that has corn that needs to be moved before harvest?
Well, logistically, get it moved before harvest. And, basis-wise, I don't think there's a lot of concern about something, falling apart or juicing that up between now and harvest. But just logistically, you've got to get it moved. I don't know if you want to be bullish about the flat prices. I don't know that you'd be bullish enough to put it into storage or a DP program, but just get it moved, yeah.
What's the thought on basis then?
Well, I was worried when you talk about a 15 billion bushel crop, record large, that the industry has never handled anything that large before. I was worried that we might be looking at a repeat of a 2013 or a 2014 when the freight was so challenging and basis just fell apart because the industry could not physically move it. However, this year is different because there's not as much coal moving on the rail lines. Natural gas is so cheap, and it's the winner in the energy market for creating electricity. So the grain freight hopefully will not be competing against coal, and so we won't, fingers crossed, have that basis collapse at harvest this year.
What do you think about the export market right now for both corn and soybeans?
I'd like to see, obviously, the corn get exported into Brazil to approve U.S. exports and start taking that in. There are areas in Brazil where the corn is the equivalent of like $7 per bushel. So the arbitrage is absolutely there to make that trade work if the nuts and bolts can be handled.
If you talk about a large production year this year, how is the market handling it for next year's crop?
You know, it's really interesting. 15 million bushels, again, it sounds so crazy, but you look at the spreads in the futures contracts between December and March, and it's only about 10 cents, less than 10 cents probably, which suggests that the commercial industry is not freaking out, that they are confident that they've got the infrastructure to deal with that much grain. So that's, again, not a real reason to feel really scared about that number.